Hi everyone. As the title says, I'm going to talk to you guys today about how I became a software engineer without a degree. I thought it was important to share my story because I noticed on a lot of other YouTube pages, there's a more traditional background from a lot of people in the industry where they received a CS degree and then they went through the interviewing process, et cetera, et cetera. My journey was a little bit more unique, so I want to share that with you guys today. And maybe give you a little bit more of a new perspective on how you could maybe break into the industry. Growing up, I was always kind of introverted. I always kept to myself. But as a kid, I was always really interested in how things worked, right? I would take my toys apart, my electronics, and put them back together, and sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. So I would always be very interested in what made things work, and I always carried that with me as I grew up. In high school, I really just did enough to get by. I really wasn't that great at math or anything like that. I did excel in English and reading and language arts and that kind of stuff. So that's really what I was more like passionate about in high school. That and science, if anything. But as far as like having a math background, I really, that wasn't my strong suit. So I graduated from high school, and then I spent, a couple of years after high school just kind of hanging around my town I grew up in, and, just trying to figure out my way, what I was doing. I, worked at a pizza place for, a number of years. I managed a pizza place here locally, and at some point, I figured out that I had to do something different. So after a number of years of working at this pizza place and trying to find my way, I said, I got to go back to school. I got to do something with my life. So I ended up going to community college here locally and getting my AA degree. And from that point, I applied to Florida State University, got into there, and I actually ended up majoring in English since I ended up being quite a proficient writer. So I did that. I graduated in 2013, and I ended up coming back home because English degrees really there really wasn't much that I could do with it. I didn't really want to be a teacher. But like I said, I did have the communication skills. I was able to communicate, effectively, writing and, things of that nature. So I came back home and I started managing at the pizza place that I worked at before I, went to college, and while I was in college. And eventually I got a job as a technical recruiter for the nuclear energy industry. So day in, day out, I was making cold calls and talking to these engineers and scientists and letting them know about job offers that we had around the country, and basically just trying to recruit them, make a commission. I did that for about a year, and then I moved into a technical recruiter position for the software industry. And once I started doing that, I just became really interested in the field. So I was constantly interfacing with software engineers and QA testers and all these people from the industry. And I would, go, to their, offices and just be around, the industry itself and see the kind of cool projects that they were working on. And that really, got me interested in this. And like I said, I was always interested in how things worked, and I always loved computers, loved gaming, all of that kind of stuff. So I just started taking it upon myself to study a little bit more about software development. Started picking up some books. I believe I started with a Python book. It was an introduction to Python. Actually, hold on a second. So yeah, I started with this book, Python Programming. It's an introduction to computer science by John Zell. It touched on Python basics, but it really touched on programming basics a lot. Your stuff for like for loops, you know, classes and object-oriented programming. It was a really good book for that. And I was just doing this so I could basically become more proficient at my job as a recruiter. So when I was having these conversations with software engineers, I didn't sound like a complete idiot. I wanted to know, you know, be able to communicate with them and know more about their skill set, communicate that, you know, effectively with them. So I just started off that way, and then I became more and more interested in it. Started writing programs at home, just, you know, basic stuff, making basic, you know, GUI applications and things like that. So my friend Tyler called me up one day, and I had known him for years. We worked at the pizza place together, you know, so he's a software engineer, and he let me know that the company that he was at was looking for a technical writer. He knew that I had graduated with a English degree, and he thought that it would be, you know, a good fit. So of course, like, I was excited about this opportunity. He said that he had already, you know, recommended me for, you know, the position and put in a good word. And, you know, I got to talking to him, and I let him know, hey, I'm actually studying software engineering right now. I'm really interested in that. Do you think that there would be a potential to where I could move into a position there, you know, eventually? Of course, like, I was ready to get out of my recruiting position because honestly, like, I had just fallen, you know, out of interest with it. So he said that he put in a good word for me, and that I should apply for the position. That's exactly what I did. And, you know, I used that as an opportunity to get my foot in the door with the skill set that I had. I ended up interviewing for the position, and I had studied for, you know, quite some time before this. I'd studied, you know, Python and C++, and, you know, brushed up on, you know, a lot of those, you know, topics and, you know, all the, you know, core fundamentals of programming. And, you know, my interview was, you know, very, you know, kind of informal. The, you know, hiring manager was very laid back. They were a, you know, startup company, so it was a very relaxed atmosphere. And basically they just let me know, like, hey, you know, they were looking for a technical writer to write their user's manual for their product. And, you know, of course, like, I was, you know, excited. I brought writing samples from my days at college, but then I also, you know, let them know that I was very interested in software development, and they, you know, kind of put me on the spot, and they were like, "Oh, really? Like, you're interested in software development? How about a coding challenge? Like, would you be interested in that?" And I said, you know, I was pretty nervous, so I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'll do the coding challenge." So right there, you know, on the whiteboard, they ended up presenting me with this problem. It was basically how to solve a problem using recursion, which I had just studied at the time, so I was pretty familiar with that. So anyways, they ended up giving me this problem, and I solved it, and I was very surprised that I got it right. They were very excited that, you know, not only was I this technical writer, and I was going to help them, you know, potentially, you know, write user manuals for their software product, but then I also had the potential to, you know, become a software developer as well. So I ended up getting an offer letter that day. I went back to my recruiting job, went back to the office, and I got an email with an offer letter, probably within like 3 hours. And, you know, I was crazy excited. I was so stoked. I felt like my life was turning around. You know, at this point, I kind of felt like I was like heading, you know, down a dead end. I ended up accepting the position, obviously, and I, you know, started there. I wrote the software user's manual, and then I eventually moved into more of a QA tester position since I became so familiar with the product from writing the manual. So I was doing a lot of testing, manual testing, And then I ended up getting into some automated testing, which required me to, write some code in C++ and also Python, become familiar with that process. And then eventually that moved into a DevOps engineer position. So I was responsible for, maintaining their build processes and their continuous integration, continuous delivery, basically making sure that all the code that the developers made was, being source controlled, and that it was being tested, and that it was, going through the proper processes before it was integrated back into the code base. And that's currently what I'm doing now, and I've been doing for the last 2 years. And I've been at my company for 3 years now. So my journey was not, very traditional. I was very lucky, and I acknowledge that. I know that there's a lot of people that go through multiple interviews before they are able to, land a position. I think the one thing that I really had going for me was that I was very enthusiastic about learning, and they were very impressed that I was able to, self-study and get spun up on these concepts, on my own. I think that goes a lot further than a lot of people, give it credit for. So for me, it was just about, getting my foot in the door and showing that, hey, I can prove myself. And like I said, I get that my experience is unique. So I don't expect everybody else, have this same kind of experience. But at the same time, I thought it was important to share my story with you guys, and let you know that, you can do it on your own, through self-studying. You don't necessarily need the CS degree in all cases. In fact, when I was recruiting, and what I'm seeing now more in the industry, is that it's more about what you can do. Can you solve those coding problems? Can you actually communicate effectively? A lot of times we see that software developers are, pretty socially awkward. So like, if you can just show that you're like down to earth and you can communicate well within a team, I think that goes a lot further than a lot of people like to give it credit for. Those soft skills are important too. It's not all about, your programming prowess, so to speak. It's more about how you work within a team as well. But that's going to pretty much do it for today's episode, you guys. If you like the video, just go ahead and like and subscribe. If you have, your own experiences about the industry that you want to, talk about, please comment below. If you have any questions, also be sure to hit me up in the comments. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can. But I'm going to try to post content here at least a couple times a week. But until next time, you guys have a great day.